Instructor Xylo presided over a congregation of multiworld whelps, a vast and drifting fleet of biological hardware docked within the school's chrome-ribbed halls. From the furthest, light-starved reaches of the galaxy, these small souls came to be uploaded with his wisdom, trading the isolation of their homestacks for a shared communion of alien cultures and calculated peace. Yet the clockwork of his order stripped its gears with the arrival of Rey. She was the first of the Terran breed to inhabit a sleeve within these walls, a walking enigma of ancient meat and stubborn history. She hailed from Earth, a world draped in the funereal shroud of legend, a death world where the very air was a toxin and the soil a hungry grave. Xylo watched the stigma bleed into the common areas, a digital infection. Every solar cycle, the Earthling retreated to a lightless corner of the common ward, chewing her rations in a tomb of her own making. He had seen the girl reach out, her human gestures a desperate broadcast into the void, but the other students recoiled. They feared the predator's scent that clung to her DNA like a lingering curse. The instructor resolved to flay this ignorance. He would show them that every world is a crucible, and every sun but a slow-burning executioner. In the grand geometry of the stars, what planet did not boast its own killing fields or unbreathable wastes? He intended to collapse the distance between their fears and her reality, hoping that by exposing the universal rot, a fragile kinship might finally take root. Amidst the hum of the classroom's life support, he issued his decree: 3 weeks from this mark, I demand a visual autopsy of your origins. You shall present the lethality of your home spheres, the fangs that hunt you and the shifting tectonic plates that seek to grind your bones. His voice was a heavy hammerfall. Collaborate if you share a cradle of origin, but know this weight is 40% of your final standing. Do not bring me shadows, bring me the grit of survival. Thus Rey, the solitary representative of the Terran filth, set to her labor. She toiled in the digital trenches, cataloging the terrors of her blue-marbled hell, while around her, the galaxy's children sharpened their own tales of biological malice. When the day of reckoning dawned, she was slated third in the queue of martyrs. She sat, her pulse a frantic drum against the cage of her ribs, watching the reports. She hungered to know what jagged edges the universe had turned against her peers, prepared to weigh their nightmares against her own. The opening gambit belonged to the spawn of Cathar. A triad of students spoke of their world's verdant cruelty, projecting the image of a small, fur-clad beast, a quadruped with a tail like a bottle brush and eyes like polished jet. Witness the suddenness of the end, one presenter barked, his voice laced with the thrill of the hunt. The screen depicted the creature teased by a scrap of fabric. In a heartbeat, the docility dissolved. The beast hissed, a sound of escaping steam and ancient hate, and lashed out. Claws, hidden until the moment of the kill, unsheathed like switchblades from the velvet of its paws. Behold, the presenter shrieked, pointing to the shimmering display. Those obsidian razors were ghosts a second ago. Had that been the soft meat of your forearm, this beast would have mapped your radius and ulna for all to see. A cold rain of applause pattered through the room. The Cathar stood tall, their chests puffed with the vanity of survivors. Only Rey remained unmoved, her face a mask of profound, twitching bewilderment. Sensing the static in her silence, Xylo leaned in. Does the truth of Cathar offend your sensibilities, Rey? The girl's voice was a low rasp. Instructor, is that not merely a house cat? A common feline? A jagged ripple of laughter broke from the pews. Xylo raised a hand, silencing the scorn, though a cynical ghost of a smile haunted his own features. No, Rey. That creature is a masterpiece of small-scale slaughter. To keep such a fiend within one's habitat is to invite a slow and rhythmic dismemberment. It is no pet for the sane. Rey bowed her head, the confusion still burning behind her eyes like a dying star, and waited for the next horror. The second choir took the stage, their voices hushed with manufactured dread. The beast of the ground is a trifle, they began, compared to the death that descends from the heavens. They wove a tapestry of orbital terror, describing a scourge that tore the sky asunder, a feathered shadow that incited a primitive, bowel-loosening fear whenever it eclipsed the sun. The audio feed swelled with a dirge-like intensity. Then the visual feed resolved upon the terror from above, a creature of garish plumage and a short, hooked beak that looked as if it were forged in a toy factory. Talons are but the preamble, the presenter noted with a flourish. Observe the crushing force of the mandibles. On screen, the avian grabbed a seed, a tiny, armored vault, and applied pressure. A crack like a pistol shot echoed through the chamber. The shell splintered, and the creature feasted on the soft meat within. The room erupted into a frenzy of religious awe. Gods protect us. What if that were a digit? A throat? We are blessed to live under kinder suns. Ray stared at the screen, her soul weary of the farce. She gestured toward the monitor, her voice cutting through the hysteria. But that is a parakeet, a winged ornament for grandmothers. The air in the room curdled. Jealousy, they whispered. Human arrogance. Xylo felt the foundations of his lesson cracking. He had known Ray to be a creature of quiet grace, but here she was, spitting on the sacred fears of her peers. Enough, he commanded, his voice armored in iron. Ray, bring your earth to the altar. Let us see your version of the dark. The girl hesitated, her sleeve trembling with a sudden chill. Instructor, I fear I have miscalculated the depth of this ocean, she said, her voice small. I believed the mandate was to show the dangers of the world, not the trivialities of the menagerie. Xylo's laugh was a dry, hacking thing. Menagerie? That feathered executioner is a god of the sky. It could never be tamed. Ray looked as if she had been struck, her lips moving in a silent, bitter prayer. Speak up, Earthling, the instructor demanded. The silence is unseemly. A student nearby rose, a smirk of malice on his face. She said her 4-year-old kin keeps a stupid parakeet as a toy, instructor. Xylo's eyes narrowed into slits of cold fury. Deliver your report now, or I shall summon your procreators and wipe your record to a 0. Do not test the patience of this hall. Like a condemned queen walking to the block, Ray rose. Every eye was a jagged flint, sparking with a collective hate. She knew this was the end of her social skin. She was about to flay herself in front of them all. If they wished to see the abyss, she would open the hatch. If a parakeet was their measure of death, she would show them the true scale of the slaughterhouse. My world is called Earth, she began, her voice gaining the steady cadence of a funeral bell. It is a place of beautiful, unyielding murder. On the monitor, the blue marble turned, a sapphire trapped in a vast, cold machine. In the frozen wastes of my north, there dwells a spirit of pure, concentrated spite, she said as a squat, muscular beast appeared. The video showed a landscape of blinding white, a silent cathedral of ice, until the ground itself exploded. The class recoiled, a collective gasp of terror as the word wolverine burned onto the screen over a face that was more teeth than flesh. What manner of demon is this? A student asked, his voice shaking like a leaf in a gale. A wolverine, Ray replied, her tone as flat as a gravestone. A creature that knows no fear and grants no quarter. No, the student interrupted, pointing at the white void. What is that crystalline shroud? That white poison? Ray blinked, the disconnect finally grounding her. The snow. S-N-O-W. Snow? Define this snow. It is the rain, Ray explained, a cruel smile touching her lips. When the sky turns so cold that the very water freezes into jagged needles before it hits the ground. A wave of horror washed over the room. The atmosphere itself freezes? In the open air? Not within a containment field. Ray shrugged, her shoulders heavy with the weight of her world. For nearly half the year, the world is a tomb of ice. We walk through it. We breathe it. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum. The wolverine, she continued, unfreezing the carnage, will challenge the very gods of the mountain. The screen showed the small beast snarling at a grizzly bear, a mountain of muscle, fat, and primal hunger. By the 7 hells, what is that titan? A student screamed. A grizzly, Ray said, watching the bear swipe at the air. They are common. They are the lords of the woods. The student was vibrating in his seat, his nervous system overtaxed. Common? You share a world with such giants? How have you not been extinct since the first dawn? Ray's laugh was a sharp, jagged piece of glass. Bears are the least of our worries. They are honest killers. Earth has deeper, more subtle horrors. You lie, Xylo whispered, his own sleeve shivering. He clutched the arms of his chair as if he were holding on to life itself. Ray fast-forwarded the data stream, landing in the deceptive peace of the tropical seas. 71% of our crust is drowned in saltwater, she said. A vast, churning graveyard filled with things that hunt by sound and blood scent. She cycled through images of crabs and squid, pausing on the seals. She looked at Xylo's, a classmate who was little more than a bipedal pinniped. Xylo's beamed, seeing his cousins frolicking in the surf. Then there are the sharks, Ray said. The screen exploded into a crimson froth as a great white breached the surface, its jaws a cathedral of serrated bone, shearing through a seal. The water turned into a red fog. Chunks of meat drifted into the dark like falling leaves. Xylo sat frozen, his mouth open in a scream that wouldn't come. End it. Power it down. Xylo shrieked, his composure shattered. I have not yet begun. Ray shouted back, her voice a clarion call of the apocalypse. I have not told you of the vampire bats that drink your life while you sleep, or the serpents that melt your blood, or the spiders that dissolve your insides. Stop. Mercy. Xylo gasped, clutching his chest as if his own heart were trying to escape his ribs. Xylos looked at Ray as if she were a ghost. How did your kind ever claw your way out of the mud of such a place? Ray stood tall, the light of the dying presentation casting her shadow long across the room. Because, she said, her eyes burning with the cold fire of 1 billion years of evolution, the most efficient, cold-blooded, and terrifying killers on Earth are humans. She turned and walked back to her seat, the air parting before her as if she were a plague. The aisle was a canyon of fear. Students pressed themselves against the walls, terrified that her touch might be fatal. At the lunch hour, Ray prepared for the finality of her solitude. She picked at her nutrients, expecting the silence of the shunned. But then, a shadow crossed her table. It was Xylo's. She looked up, bracing for the sting of his hatred. You are magnificent, Xylo's breathed, his eyes wide with a new kind of hunger. Did you truly see such a shark with your own naked eyes? Ray felt a strange warmth bloom in her chest. My uncle and I hauled one from the depths once. It was smaller than the one on screen, but it had the same teeth. You captured one. Xylos shouted, his fear turning into the frenzied adoration of a disciple. To best such a demon. Then came the others. A swarm of curious, terrified, and awed souls, demanding to hear of the vampires and the frozen rain. Ray, the queen of the death world, sat at the center of a new kingdom. From his high window, Xylo watched the carnage of his classroom turn into the fellowship of the damned. He returned to his terminal, his hands still shaking as he tried to finalize her grade. He attempted to watch the rest of her data feed, but when he saw the piranhas strip a bovine to a skeleton in seconds, he simply closed the file. He let out a ragged, exhausted laugh. If she survived that hellscape, he muttered, she is more than a student. She is a survivor. Give her the A.